Welcome to Recruitment Rehab, the podcast for your recruitment confessions. Yes, we'll talk about what makes a great recruiter, a great recruitment business, and the secrets behind the success of our various guests. But we're also here to unpack why the industry has such a stellar reputation. You know, like being ranked just above traffic wardens and just below estate agents in the public's hearts. Each episode, we're going to be joined by guests from across the recruitment spectrum to share war stories, confess their past sins, and even maybe admit to being the reason that someone was sworn off recruiters forever. It's part therapy, part revelation, and entirely more honest than your average job spec. This is Recruitment Rehab. Let's get stuck in. Today's guest has never built a desk, but he's seen more recruitment startups succeed and fail than most recruiters will ever experience. He's been operating in the recruitment incubation space since 2015, spotting recruiters just before they take the leap and helping them turn ideas into actual businesses. In 2020, he officially launched Isotope as a recruitment startup induction service, and since then has helped launch over 100 recruitment agencies, currently working with more than 70 of them. His clients range from solo founders to agencies turning over 5 million plus across markets from education and construction through to finance, engineering and logistics. So if you're thinking about going out on your own, this one's for you. Max, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me on. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, thank you very much.
So a little bit of a different episode, this one, because obviously you've never been a recruiter yourself. So let's start there. How did you end up building a business that works so closely with recruitment founders?
Yeah. So I suppose the triggers for me to go out and do something myself, probably very similar to a recruiter looking at doing something themselves. Obviously, I worked in this space, this kind of startup incubation investment support space in my previous role. So joined that business straight out of university kind of thing. I joined that business as maternity cover for a sales support admin kind of role because, quite frankly, coming out of uni, you're not quite sure what you're going to be doing. So did that for a couple of months and then transitioned within that business to the procurement side of things. So really the 4 or 5 years that I was with the team there, it was identifying recruiters who might fit that model to help them start and develop their own thing. So my appetite for, I suppose, recruitment and this space in particular came directly off the back of those kind of 4 or 5 years there. Personally, very similar to I'm sure some of the guys that you chat to, obviously had always thought about doing something for myself. So it was really about understanding the best vehicle to do that in. And yeah, fortunately, this is what it is.
Okay. So we'll get on to more of the running a business side of things a bit later. But from an outsider's perspective, like what surprised you most when you first started working with recruiters?
Question. Yeah, I think obviously there's a stigma, and this is part of the reason why this podcast is obviously so important. There's a stigma around recruiters that it's quite a sleazy salesman-esque kind of thing. And I think what surprised me, even though I didn't have that kind of mentality, because quite frankly, like many people going into recruitment, I didn't really know what it was, didn't know how to spell it, didn't know what it was, didn't know kind of the mechanics of any of it. So when I kind of came into it, I was pretty naive as to what to kind of expect. But I think what surprised me most is, and I'm sure you kind of feel the same way, is how consultative a very good and these great recruiters really have to be. Not only are they, but they have to kind of be because of the markets that they're in and the kind of the ability to then pitch and catch with these candidates and clients. Obviously, that needs to be so kind of thorough and so kind of deep. So I suppose my perception of recruitment was not a lot because I didn't really know much about it. But I think one of the stigmas that is attached to it is this sleazy sales and stakeholder salesman kind of thing. And quite frankly, it couldn't be further from the truth if you actually start to understand it. So I think one of the most common things is how consultative people really are in it.
Yeah. No, that's nice to hear. What do the best recruitment founders that you work with all seem to have in common?
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted, isn't it? And I'm sure you kind of feel it, having run something for yourself for the time that you have, and obviously prior as well. I think good founders, they're content with always where they are in that business, but they're never fully satisfied with it. Of course, if you delve into the mechanics, and I'm sure we will, there are certain things in the structure of their days and weeks and months that they kind of achieve as an absolutely non-negotiable. These are the real founders that kind of, make something of that business. But I suppose as kind of overarching themes, there is a direct correlation to if a business is doing really, really well, 9 times out of 10, that business owner is never going to be quite happy with where these things are. So it's kind of as corners and actions that are proud but never satisfied kind of thing. But I think it's a theme that we'll kind of get onto at some stage. But one of the challenges, obviously, as I know you know yourself when you start up on your own, is that you lose that sense of accountability and kind of discipline that you naturally get in very good agencies that train you up in the right way. So I think very capable and successful business owners appreciate that, attack it head on, and have these systems in place from ideally day one to kind of help them get through that.
Yeah, that kind of leads me on to my next question, really. Obviously, you see a lot of startups close up. What are the most common reasons recruitment businesses fail in their first 2 or 3 years? You know, you've mentioned that accountability piece there. Is it that, or are there other things?
Again, it's probably twofold. Yeah, I was like, what, threefold. I think the first one is always that. And I know it's going to sound very obvious, and it is such a consistent theme, I'm sure, in this episode. But that accountability and that discipline is so important in terms of mentally trying to treat yourself, isn't it? And you'll know this yourself, mentally trying to treat yourself as, well, I'm just an employee of this business. Yes, I happen to own that business, especially in those early days. You are just a highly paid employee if you're just working as a solo founder in some respects. So it's really, how do I get the systems and the process in place to enable this business to do then what I want it to do? So I think if people don't nail that, 9 times out of 10, you can see that in the numbers, and then you just reverse engineer it and see that they're not doing that, or they're maybe, well, they're not remaining accountable to it. The other one is more on not understanding some of the tax obligations that come with them running that business. And when I say not understanding it, probably just not being aware of how important it is to really be on top of that. You know, if you look at that really vulnerable point of startups, everyone thinks it's the first 0 to 6 months. And yeah, of course it is in some respects. But one of the other kind of vulnerable periods is kind of 9 to 18 months where you're getting a bit of momentum. But of course, those bad habits that if you'd kind of forgotten about them in those early days, they're going to come and bite you. And one of the ones we've seen, not a lot, but consistently, if that makes sense, is kind of, yeah, not appreciating those tax obligations.
So, for example, you know, you get your first 5 or 6 invoices in, obviously with that on top as well. Forgetting the fact you've got a corporation tax bill coming, forgetting the fact you've got to pay yourself tax on the dividends you take in, forgetting the fact that you've got to pay a VAT return, and they just spunk all that money in before you.
And they do. And even though, I mean, like, especially with the VAT, and again, I know you'll probably know it firsthand. Yeah, you make a placement for £8,000, but you happen to get paid £8,000 plus 20%. You know, you're going to have to be ignorant or maybe a little bit naive to think, okay, well, what do I have to do with that money? Oh, I can spunk it on LinkedIn Recruitment. No, I can spunk it on wherever I want. So yeah, those are the main ones. You know, VAT, corporation tax. I think the personal tax obligations, that's one that I think surprises a lot of people. And also it's a different mentality to kind of get into, isn't it? When you're an employee, your source is tax at source. What you see is what you see. You don't have to think about anything else really. But of course, you know, you're paying yourself the gross amount when you're running something for yourself. So it's a shift you've got to make, and you've got to make them quite quickly.
It's interesting what you said as well about the accountability piece. I think that's a cycle a lot of people probably go through. Most people probably set up and run it like a lifestyle business to start with, unless they've got a huge amount of cash potentially, and they want to scale from day one. So you want to enjoy the fruits of that. And I remember looking back, I was just getting out of bed, starting work at 10, working till 4, and it was very lifestyle. I was fortunate that it was that post-COVID period, so I think I got away with it. But when that market became a lot more normal, I had a decision to make, like, right, you either buck up and get a grip of things, or this business is going to go under. I know that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, sorry, mate. You mentioned that when we spoke kind of offline about it as well. I think, and also it's that kind of idea of a lifestyle thing as well, in terms of, like, I think the best way to kind of shift it is that ultimately you're going to work for ABC Recruitment. Yes, on paper you might be the only director, the sole shareholder, but you work for that business. And what would that business be asking you to do? Well, quite frankly, just do that.
Yeah, it sounds very obvious, doesn't it? But it's easy to slip out of doing that, isn't it?
Yeah. What made you shift into slipping out of it, if that makes sense? As in, you know, what made you change? Was it the market changing that you thought, right, I've really got my ideas over, essentially?
Yeah, exactly. So we set up in April 22, and And the first sort of 6 months, it was just like shooting fish in a barrel. Like everyone wanted to hire grads, no one could hire quick enough. So we just put a few job ads out, read a few grads, and we're doing sort of 5, 6 deals a month. Back end of 22, start of 23, it got very, very difficult. And I was just like, what are you doing? Like I used to be hammering the phones in my old job. I had strict KPIs, and I'd gone away from that. And I was like, if you want to make a success of this business, you're going to have to get some sort of process in place and start being disciplined with yourself. And so yeah, that was it. It was forced by the market really, but it's the best thing that ever happened because yeah, couldn't have carried on.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, we've got clients that we've supported over the years that have gone through that same journey, despite the fact that, like yourself going into it, you're very experienced, you know what you have to do. I think, yeah, if we look at consistently, one of the things that is a little bit of a hiccup or a hurdle, it is that kind of, oh, well, now I run something for myself, I can do whatever I want. Yeah, you can, but there's still a cost to that, in the same way that if you were working with someone else, there's a cost to that as well.
Yeah. At what point do you usually know whether a recruitment startup is likely to make it or not?
Yeah. I think it leads on from the last question. I think usually between that 9 to 18 month mark, you really know if they're gonna do something with that business. Obviously something in terms of how they define that is always slightly different. It could just be them, it could be a 5-10 man thing, it could be a real kind of scale up. But yeah, 9 times out of 10, if we look at it internally, you kind of earmark, okay, if that business is 9-18 months in and in a strong and stable position, yeah, 9 times out of 10 they're gonna go on, barring kind of a disaster. Yeah.
So and if you had to pick like one red flag that you see, what would it be that that would suggest that it's not going to work?
Oh, it's just yeah. So I think if in the business reviews that you're having with those consultants, those owners, whether it be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, when you're auditing their desk with them, it's pretty obvious if they're actually doing the numbers that they need to do to get the outcome that they say they want. There's always a difference with some founders about what they say they want, and then obviously the actions that they're actually taking to kind of get there. And I think the red flags when you're looking at, when they're in it, tend to be that. I think the red flags when you're thinking about starting up on your own, the reasons for that, I think, the biggest one there, as obvious as it sounds, is that if an individual is too pushed to do it, and by that I basically mean, and we've all been there, as in on the other end of the phone, when someone's saying, basically, I just don't like what I'm doing right now. I've had a bad day, a bad week, a bad month. I hate my boss. I hate this. If you're doing it simply to get out of where you currently are, you and I both know starting something for yourself is probably not the right thing for you to do. And if you're only driven by the financials, because again, you and I both know that if it's simply you want to see a little bit more of what you earn, I absolutely understand that, of course, that's a catalyst, but you can get a better commission structure elsewhere and maybe just do that.
So I suppose on the flip side of that, then what's a good sign? What do you look for? A green flag, as they call it these days.
Yeah. So I think a whole host of things. I think as you'll know, when you're identifying the right consultants for you and in your business to work with, I think when you're looking at kind of on paper professionally what they've been doing, there's a pedigree and kind of an experience level that you'd expect there. Not only just time at the crease, 5, 10, 15 years of kind of experience doing what they're doing, but it's then really, as I know the nature of that experience, isn't it? And if the nature of that experience will actually equip them to doing what they want in their own thing. For example, if they want to scale up a business and develop that business to one day maybe sell it, if they've not, I'm distilling it down, but if they've not maybe gone through that process of building branches, managing teams, doing all that type of stuff for somebody else, you would argue whether it's probably better to maybe get that experience elsewhere first and then do it for themselves rather than using their first test run as their own thing. But I think that experience level obviously is a major green flag. And I think on a personal level, it's personally being in a stable position. Do they have, I would say, the awareness of what that kind of, especially first 6-12 months, is going to look like, and have they got the cash behind them essentially to ease into that? So usually that runway, I'm sure it'll be a theme we kind of get onto, maybe 6 or 9 months of kind of salary behind someone. 9 probably being not too much, but too much, and anything less than 6 probably being a little bit too little. And then really, you're doing for the reasons that we all expect, which is the pride, the autonomy, the sense of achievement, the sense of, okay, I know this particular market, be it education, industrial, engineering, whatever it might be, like the back of my hand. I want to make a real difference in that market. And I think we've seen that and I'm sure you have seen that a lot more over the last couple of years, and actually people meaning that as well. So yeah, those would be some of the greener flags.
I'm really interested by that, because perhaps naively, I assume that people who go out on their own, and look, I'm sure you can appreciate this is discussed all the time with, on nights out within recruitment businesses between the top performers. I assume that most people do it because they want to retain more of what they built. Now, you're saying that that can be a bit of a red flag for you if that's the sole driver. So I just wanted to nail down a little bit.
I know what you mean.
Why do you think that is?
I think yeah. So maybe it's the way that I was framing it. I would say that if the only driver or the primary driver is that I'm not a fan of the current commission scheme that I'm on, I want to see more than 10%. I want to do this, I want to do that. Then I would say that momentum is only really going to take you so far when you start up on your own, because yourself, the associated cost with running a recruitment agency, it isn't okay. Well, if I build 10 grand working for an employer, I'm only going to see 20%. But if I start up on my own, I'm going to see 100%. You don't see 100%. So it's really looking at, yes, of course, the financials are always going to be a catalyst. It's always going to be, I was speaking to my mates in an after work kind of social, and of course, yeah, I'd love to see a bit more. I just made a 20 grand placement. I only saw 2 grand of it pre-tax. Yeah, I'd be a little bit niggled with that. But I would be saying, just in our experience, the guys that we haven't worked with and maybe haven't then gone on to start up on their own, who it's solely, they're just a bit pissed off with the lack of earning potential in their current place. Again, I'd probably be saying, explore another agency will offer you something else, kind of, even if it's just a kind of a middle ground, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thanks for clearing that up. And what do you think is the biggest difference between those recruiters who always talk about going out on their own and doing their own thing versus the ones who actually take the plunge and do it?
I think it's an element of kind of bottle that at the end of the day, there's only so much you can talk about it before you actually just have to do it. And I think ultimately it's all about the timing, isn't it? About making sure that you're doing these things at the right time. So it would be very rare for us, for example, and I know I'm just sitting it down, but to talk to someone on the Monday and to launch that business on the Friday. And I think, again, if you look at green and red flags over the years, if you saw that kind of speed, you'd be concerned as to whether this was the right move for them. So it's being considered about these things. And also when they then look at their desk, at their current place, being quite forensic as to what makes up that desk in terms of, and it's a very easy kind of exercise, but if you look at, let's say a consultant was generating 200 grand a year with ABC clients or ABC recruitment at the moment, then you'd be thinking, okay, well, of that 200 grand a year, if you look at the client split, where have those clients actually come from? I.e., how many have you inherited in the business that you're currently in versus legitimate new business that, of course, is going to be the lifeblood of your new business going forward. Now, if in that 200 grand, I don't know, 40% of it is new business, but 60% of it is inherited, then you'd be questioning, okay, well, it's not going to be a 200 grand desk then, is it? So you're thinking, okay, well, would I be happy with doing just shy of 100 grand in my own thing?
No, that's great insight. And you touched on it earlier about the misconception potentially about how much money you retain. What else do a lot of recruiters underestimate when it comes to knowing what it takes to run a business, and what do people most commonly get wrong before they launch?
I think they get wrong the runway that they're going to need. I think a lot of the time people so they get wrong the runway that they're going to need, and probably not get wrong, but maybe overestimate the client relationships that they might have, and kind of not the loyalty, but the speed at which they'll be able to transition those clients potentially across from their current place to somewhere else. Obviously, they're all well aware of restrictions and abiding by them, but just generally speaking, those tend to be the two, I would say, when you're kind of looking at that type of stuff.
And in your experience, like, how long does it usually take before a new agency becomes commercially stable?
Yeah, depends on the market, as I know yourself, but I would say traditionally you see these solo founders producing or generating a business that is sustainable for their income and kind of a stable base, usually between that kind of 6 to 9 month kind of period, I would say, which obviously marries up quite nicely to that runway that they're going to need.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would traditionally say that's probably what it is. But as I know, you know yourself, it depends on the market, the lead time, their appetite, where their clients come from. Obviously, there are certain sectors where you have to be part of larger kind of PSLs, or you know, kind of your health and social cares of this world, where kind of the VMSs, sorry, are quite important. So it really depends. Yeah.
You know, whether you get paid on time as well, that's often a big shock
Yeah,
for us,
having
isn't
that
it?
and having that kind of contingency plan in place, isn't it? Which I'm sure kind of you felt. It's a little bit like when you're hiring, isn't it? It's the same mentality. You kind of think, okay, why am I hiring? Am I hiring for the right reasons? And if this business is hiring, what do we need behind us? Well, you need that runway of maybe 4 to 6 months anyway.
And what's the biggest operational distraction you find that stops founders doing what makes them, like, what actually makes them money?
Yeah, honestly, everything else is
Right.
a distraction, isn't it? You know, I mean, you know yourself. You know, the most important thing for a recruiter to be trying to do the most in their given day is the recruitment side of things. So the operational side, be it the financials, the accounting, the back office, the credit control side of things, the compliance, the HR, the marketing, the liaising with third party suppliers. I would say that is always an operational headache that you want to try and position a business to give yourself as much freedom to not do those things, but not do those things. Doesn't mean that you
Mm.
can't be interested in it, nor do you have to be interested in it. I think that's a misconception, that you can engage some business or an accountant or a compliance function or kind of an incubation kind of process that will just take those things away from you, and then you don't have to think about them. You and I both know that a good founder will want to know about it. It's just not necessarily that they'll be doing it day to day.
Yeah, that leads me on nicely to this question. Like, which parts of a recruitment business do you think must be understood by the founder, even if they are outsourced?
Accounts and back office, obviously. And depending on the stage of that business, the compliance and the HR on, yeah, I would say, especially if you're growing that business and you don't have a grapple on the HR side of things internally within your business, then it's going to come up back and bite you in the same way that if you don't have an understanding or even an interest in the accounts and back office side of that business, again, doesn't mean you have to be doing it, but you'll know it from obviously running your business for the length of time that you have. You just get interested in it as well, don't you? Because you realize
Yeah.
how the pillar it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And how important do you think things like management accounts are in the early days?
A, a mistake that founders would make is that these things aren't important. You know, it's the management accounts are there to manage your business. You know, that's why they're called MMAs. You know, it's monthly management accounts that enable you to have a snapshot of exactly where your business is. And also, if you engage with the right type of accounts function, that management account extends far beyond just a P&L and a balance sheet that no one really understands, or no one really understands the context of. You know, those management accounts are meant to tell you things about your business. So yeah, I think it's one of the most exciting stages of each month for myself. Call me becoming kind of lame, but you know, I like getting our accounts and everything going through them. I'm sure you do as well. And also they don't really last. So if you had a good month, brilliant. If you had a bad month, then at least it gives you that kick up the arse that you need.
I want to move on to like founder versus recruiter mindset. So, in your experience, what habits make someone a great recruiter, but not necessarily a great business owner?
Yeah. So I think it's understanding that essentially you can't just do the recruitment as a founder. Yes, it's incredibly important, and of course that's where the majority of your time needs to be. But you need to understand the wider context of building that desk within a business. So fantastic recruiters, sometimes you see it on paper as well, you know, very good recruiters that quite frankly don't have the appetite to go out on their own. And that's basically because they don't have the appetite to focus on the other areas that will come with running that business. And I think, again, it's kind of not attributing, oh, well, I bill 500 grand with my current employer, I have to go and do it on my own. No, you don't. Of course you don't. No, it's really about the difference between being a great recruiter and being a great founder and a great operator is that you know the context of where all these other things fit into then building that desk out.
And what do you think then is the most difficult mindset shift recruiters need to make when they become business owners as well?
Yeah, looking at what a good client really in that business is, and looking at the metrics that you need to measure success in, and looking at the KPIs and basically saying what's an effective KPI in my business versus a KPI that in my previous place, I was just ticking. So some of the time it's auditing those clients and working. And I know it sounds really easy to say, very hard to kind of, action, but working with a quality portfolio of clients that are going to aid you and your business at this stage as well, rather than just any Tom, Dick, and Harry that's going to give you an invoice in the month of January.
Yeah. And when do you think a founder should stop billing individually, if ever?
I would probably argue if ever. Yeah. I think obviously, it depends on where that business wants to go, of course. And there'll absolutely be a stage if that business gets to a certain size where, quite frankly, if you're looking at selling that business, for example, a third party who are looking to buy that business, if you're billing any significant proportion of the NFI that comes into that business, obviously that is a little bit of a red flag, a little bit of a problem, because it would question, well, what are you doing once this business is sold? But I would be saying there might be a uniquer way of kind of looking at it, but I would be leading from the front as much as you can. Absolutely, they will get to a stage where you might not have the bandwidth to do it, but you want to be able to future-proof your business by getting consultants in that obviously produce that NFI, so you don't have to. But equally, you want to be as close to it to make sure that, well, if anything happened to that business in terms of the consultants within it, the NFI is not just going to disappear.
On the flip side of that, do you see many founders that accidentally build businesses that rely entirely on them?
Yeah, and that's a shift that, again, it doesn't matter though, does it? It doesn't matter if you build a business completely based on you, if you're not looking at really doing, when I say doing anything, if you're not looking at selling that business or exiting that business for any kind of sum of money. If you're the best recruiter in a business of 5 and you happen to own that business, then what's wrong with that? As long as you're aware that, of course, that's less of a saleable asset than one that isn't as reliant on you. So I think it always goes with, what's your objective in this business, both now and long term. And if you're the top biller, be the top biller. But of course, you don't want to be that top biller, because you and I both know you want to bring people into this business that are going to outperform you.
Yeah, that all the kind of top voices in this industry that I listen to echo that, in terms of, you need to understand what you want the business to be. Like, if you want it to be a 5-person business, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with the business relying on you. But if you want to scale and reach an exit point, then that's not going to be worth very much. If everything revolves around you, so it's about what success looks like for you ultimately.
Yeah, and I think it's also like trying to identify what you actually want from this business. And I think that's changed over the last couple of years as well, which is really positive, because I think this kind of appetite, of course, is absolutely still there. This appetite that you have to build these maniac kind of businesses that are, 30, 50, 70 consultant kind of strong within the next couple of years. It just isn't really where most founders, at least the founders that we speak to, really have an appetite for. It's within that kind of 1 to 5, maybe a little bit more, absolutely. But yeah, that kind of 1 to 5, obviously their approach to the billings and the revenue coming into that business is drastically different, as you say. Yeah, a business of a far greater size.
And what does a sellable recruitment business look like from your perspective?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things, and I'm sure obviously echoed with previous guests or people that you've seen in the industry that kind of waffle on about these things as well. The first one is the multifaceted kind of approach when we look at the sectors or the verticals within a sector that business is within. And of course, that's the perm and contract kind of offering the splits with that. Can you sell a perm-based agency? Yeah, of course you can. But can you demand a higher value for obviously a dual desk, with that contract arm being quite a prevalent one? 100%. So I think that's one of the most important aspects, kind of trying to be, if you have a mindset that you want to build and sell this business, then of course those are the pillars that you want to get in place as soon as you kind of can, as obviously the notes sound. And then it's the second one that we kind of mentioned already, in terms of how can I as quickly and sustainably as possible produce a business that is not reliant on me whatsoever, unless you're keen or of a certain age where you think, well, actually, if I sell this business, I know I'm going to have the appetite to be part of the legacy plan of that business. And that might be something that a third party vendor would find appealing, like, having me, the founder, in that business going forward properly. But 9 times out of 10, a founder will want to get in, do a couple of years and then get out. And every kind of person knows that. So I think it's trying to present or trying to build a business that has that management structure in place as sustainably as you can.
Yeah, I'm certainly no like voice of authority on this subject, but from what I hear, it's obviously recurring revenue. So a solid contracts book is obviously going to help the size of your multiplier when it comes to selling, and then it's those like repeatable, scalable processes, the ability to just drop someone new into a business and it just be like a well-oiled machine. And then obviously you've got, repeat business from massive accounts. Are you just doing spot business, or do you have some solid accounts that are giving you repeat business year on year?
And it's also like the diversification of that client portfolio as well, isn't it? You don't want an over reliance on a handful of clients. You think, well, cynically, if they were to go pop or suddenly change their internal process, do you have a business that has demanded that multiple last year kind of thing? But yeah, it's all those kind of things, isn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Um, you mentioned management there. At what point do you think a recruitment business has to bring in management layers to scale properly?
Yeah, I think that to scale properly, you would need those pillars in place as soon as you possibly can. I wouldn't force it either. There comes a point where having levels of management just for levels of management's sake becomes a little bit counterproductive. But I would be replicating essentially the journey. It goes back to what we were saying before in terms of wanting to be on that journey before building desks or divisions or branches previously. It's usually, if you look at a couple of years out from maybe wanting to be in a position where you're looking to sell that business, you want that management structure in place to ensure you have that continuity. So there's no kind of rule of thumb on it, but generally speaking, if that business has a management structure in place for maybe 3-4 years prior to, yes, we'd like to sell this kind of thing, then that's a good kind of position to be in, because I think that continuity when you're looking at who is going to be a part of that business when you maybe leave is quite important.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, I want to move on to recruitment's reputation. So it'd be interesting to get your opinion on this from a bit of a kind of outside perspective. But I know
Yeah.
you obviously work heavily in the industry, but
Yeah.
don't actually, work as a recruiter. So, as someone outside recruitment originally, like, why do you think the industry has the reputation that you alluded to before, such as, that sleazy type of reputation?
I think like most industries, there's good and bad. Of course, there is. I think ultimately because it's a sales based role, it gets tarnished with the brush of sales, which is you don't care about the individual, you just care about the money. You don't care about me, you just care about the outcome. So it doesn't matter if you're talking to me or Bob Smith, as long as you get your money, why do you care, Mr. Recruiter? And I do think that comes from a misunderstanding of actually what recruitment is, or what a good recruiter kind of is, which is a very consultative, very inch wide kind of mile deep kind of consultant who understands that market like the back of their hand. And I think what's helped for the industry certainly over the last couple of years is how kind of open it's become about what makes a good recruiter versus maybe not necessarily a very good one. But I think the stigma comes from ultimately poor experiences that individuals have, unfortunately, through just unfortunately dealing with probably the wrong individual that maybe is in the wrong environment, that they're focused on the wrong KPIs, the wrong outcomes, and essentially you're just part of a long list of people that they have to call to say they've made their 100 calls that day.
Do you think the industry's improving and the reputation of the industry is improving? And if so, why?
I would say so. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I would say that hopefully one of the primary reasons for that is podcasts like this, where you're really pulling back, the layer of what it means to be a recruiter, what it means to operate in this space and be successful in it. And again, the definition of success isn't just the money, is it? It's the longevity. And I think end clients are demanding it a lot more from recruiters, which obviously pulls the industry up as well, which is they're demanding these individuals to be thought leaders in their industry, not just recruitment, but in their industry. If they're in cybersecurity, they have to know, a heck of a lot about cybersecurity to be able to talk to clients and candidates in that market and be worth the salt. So yeah, I think it's positively going in the right direction because of podcasts like this, because of social media in general, because of the fact that you really can't hide behind things now, which is great. And again, it goes back to that level of kind of accountability as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, without obviously blowing my own trumpet, I think podcasts like this help. You get to know the person behind the job title. I think personal branding as well on LinkedIn, whilst some people have an opinion of it going too much towards being like Facebook, I think it helps you again get to know that person and allows people to drop the guard a little bit, as opposed to just being this corporate robot show off type figure that perhaps their LinkedIn activity had portrayed them as previously. And if you could enforce one rule across every recruitment business that you work with, what would it be?
A factor checking kind of platform within LinkedIn, especially in the context of when you're running something for yourself. You have unbridled autonomy and authority to write whatever you want about the success of your business and the numbers. And quite frankly, being this side of the fence and seeing the reality of what it takes, and yourself what it takes to run and sustain a very, very good recruitment business. It's a hard journey to kind of go through. So when people are presenting this false narrative on LinkedIn, it can really demotivate individuals who obviously are really trying to do the right things at the right times and really are on that right path. Because Bob Smith says something on LinkedIn that hasn't been fact checked. It makes them feel pretty poor about it.
No, I agree. It can be demotivating for sure, and I think I'm really passionate about authenticity. So yeah, celebrate the highs. You should be really proud of yourself. When you're having record months and quarters and whatnot. But let's just be transparent about the journey. Like we all have dropouts. We all have tough months. We all miss target. And you don't see enough of that. I think so.
You all make mistakes in that business journey as well yourself. I think when you go out on your own, it was in a kind of a theme that's come up quite a bit when we're kind of talking to our guys, that part of the buy-in that you get from clients, isn't it, is if you are open about, well, no, this is just me in my back bedroom doing what I'm doing. Yeah, I might have started 6 months ago, but I've got 10 years in this game. So just because I now work for AVC Recruitment by the door doesn't mean those 10 years are completely redundant.
Yeah, just be honest about who you are, and a lot of clients will prefer that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
if anything, they support you even more, don't they?
Yeah, it's sink or swim. Like, you've got bills to pay, and if you don't bill, you don't eat. So I think that's a great bit of advice. Just be honest. Don't try and be something that you're not.
Yeah, and so kind of something our guys do. I'm sure you do as well. Like breaking down the cost a little bit more than just we're going to charge you 15% or we're going to charge you 17.5%. Break it down. Be really kind of clear in terms of this is the reason why we get to that fee structure, and these are the costs associated with a traditional search, and this is why we kind of get to that, or this is why we can do it for slightly less than maybe agency number 2, because obviously our overheads are slightly less and blah blah blah. So you don't like you're undercutting and therefore devaluing a service. You're just legitimately pricing it for what you need.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting one. That I want to move on to slightly contentious topics, certainly ones that may divide opinion. So, do you think too many recruiters go out on their own too early?
Yes, and I think, I think, fun enough, that's because of the accessibility of the support to help you do that, if that makes sense. So, yeah, no, I certainly think
your fault, effectively.
Yeah, exactly, effectively, yeah. But no, I absolutely do think that's absolutely right. Yeah, I think, I mean, just speaking from personal experience, we've spoken to individuals that, you're just not ready, and they do it anyway. And sometimes we're completely wrong, and they clearly were ready, and it was fantastic. And other times we weren't wrong. So yeah, no, I do think they do, and I think the reason for that is probably, again, multi kind of faceted. But I think the narratives on LinkedIn, you go on LinkedIn at any day, any given day of the week, and then somebody started up on their own, which is great in some respects, but also I think presents this idea that it's an easier transition to make than it is. And also, even though there is a lot of kind of conversation around how hard that journey is, again, there's not enough conversation about how hard or kind of challenging that journey is. Doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't do it, but there is a big argument to wait until a better time to do it.
What about remote teams within a startup business? Do you think it genuinely works, or is it a bit of a luxury?
When you say luxury, is in from a cost point of view, luxury, or
yeah,
I think fun enough with the remote teams, because it's it's a slightly more cost-effective way to do it sometimes as a startup, then I would say it's a positive thing to look at. So part of one of the stepping stones that a number of our clients will do when they're probably not in that position to bring someone on full time in a quote unquote traditional sense, they'll look at remote workers, be it in South Africa or Pakistan over the years, the Philippines, wherever it might be, and they're really specific in terms of what they're looking for that individual to do. And I think it goes back to the same reasons why are you hiring? Why are you having that additional cost? If it's to aid in your desk rather than prop that desk up, then do it. And I wouldn't view it as a luxury. I view it as a cost to running that desk when the demand is there. And spoke to one of our guys literally yesterday about it, who's maybe 8-9 months into the journey, and he's just basically firmed up a remote worker to work on the resourcing side of things, because essentially he's client heavy, got too many roles to service, obviously, on the lack of the candidate side of things. It's more the candidate generation. So as long as you're specific about it, no, I think it's a positive thing to do, and a really good stepping stone if you're then looking at building that business in terms of traditional individuals in it.
What about like remote working versus hybrid working versus on-site working in general, specifically within recruitment? Where do you stand on it?
So in an agency setting, if I was employed, I'd be saying some element of hybrid working. Obviously, I would say hybrid working is the thing to do. 100% remote comes with its challenges, in the same way that 100% of the office, we've seen that as a straw that broke the camel's back of an individual saying, I can't do this anymore, I've got to do it for myself, it's killing me, kind of thing. So I think hybrid is the way to go. And I think a genuine hybrid kind of structure that gives people the authority and kind of the autonomy to pick and choose what they do. Hybrid working, when you're suggesting that they got to be in on a Monday, can take Tuesday at home, got to be on a Wednesday, Thursday at home, Friday in the office. That is hybrid working, but it's very rigid. It's not flexible working. Whereas if it's a flexible approach to that hybrid work, and I would say 9 times out of 10 that works in the context of running something for yourself. I'm distilling it down, but the guys that we've supported who have done remote first, it's been far more challenging than it ought to have been. Hybrid, fully in the office. Those are the two kind of sweet spots if you're looking at growing that business, I would say, especially in those early days, because you want to be around them in some respects, of course.
Yeah. What about AI from an investor, operator point of view? Where do you see it genuinely adding value versus potentially becoming a bit of a distraction, or allowing people to cut corners a little bit?
I think I think it's it can be a distraction. If you look at the narrative in LinkedIn, it's absolutely on the money in terms of, like, there's a lot of chat about AI and some really kind of good use cases for it. But again, it's a little bit like the rec tech space in general. There's so much out there that it can be a little bit overwhelming and become a full-time job to figure out what you should and shouldn't be using. So I think if you were to look at your recruitment process right now and thought, right, okay, where can automation genuinely help? You'll probably only fall on maybe a couple of aspects of that. And again, it's very sector specific as well, isn't it? In your lower skilled kind of, candidate pools, your industrials, your warehouses, your kind of blue collar construction, you can see where that kind of AI kind of interface is going to be useful. Whereas in the slightly more senior level, it's probably more of a deterrent than anything else. Probably put me off.
Yeah. The two things you said there that I massively agree with. One, like the rec tech space, there's so much stuff out there, it is overwhelming, isn't it? Like it could all pretty much add value in some capacity, but you can't have it all. And I think on the AI side of things, exactly, like it's about choosing those low value tasks that maybe burn more time than needs to be spent on them, and finding out how you can automate them, so ultimately you can spend more time doing the high value tasks. And I think as long as you look at it from that perspective versus how can I be lazy basically and do less, I think you'll have success with it. But I think a lot of people may be too tempted to go down the latter route, and it will cost them.
And I think also that might be because you there's this fear of missing out, I think, as well, isn't there? There's a fear that, well, everyone's talking about it, so there must be something there. So I have to spend half my working week looking at it. And ultimately, it's not conducive to a successful kind of desk.
Yeah. So just to kind of round out then, mate, looking ahead, like what advice would you give to a high performing recruiter right now who's seriously considering taking a leap and doing something for themselves?
I would firstly look at my current desk and do that audit that we loosely kind of touched upon in this conversation in terms of what's the billing potential of this desk right now, and where am I getting those placements from in terms of the candidate, the client relationships and where they're coming from. And I think then it's kind of saying, right, okay, have I got the personal runway to really do this for myself? So that usually that's 6 to 9 months vehicle to help me to get there. And then thirdly, it's kind of looking at, okay, well, what do I need to help me get from a very kind of popular idea in my own head that I might have been thinking about for 6 to 18 months to launching and developing this business, and where are the areas that I want to spend most of my time versus the areas that I might need some support. And the beauty of this space is that there are, dissimilar to maybe 10 years ago, there are so many routes out there for recruiters to go out there and do it for themselves that you'll be able to find the right route for you. It's just trying to be really specific in terms of what type of support you feel you're going to need to kind of do it. So I would say it's threefold: auditing that desk and looking at those client relationships, and also just a tangent from that, being aware of those post-contractual obligations and what you can and can't do. The second one is personally having that runway there to enable you to do that. And then thirdly, being really specific in terms of what support you feel you're going to need. And the beauty of it is you'll be able to find it. Just you've got to identify what it is.
Who should, well, how can you help those type of people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So really from our sales point of view, you're hoping to essentially say to these guys, the beauty of doing that third exercise is, okay, whatever you've written down that you feel you're going to need to launch and then support this business both now and into the future, anything that falls outside the remit of recruitment, somebody here at ISO would hope to help that individual with. So from our side of things, it's trying to become an out and out extension of that business in all the core areas that come with running that business, aside from the day job that, quite frankly, those individuals will know like the absolute back of their hand. They don't necessarily need coaching and educating about how to run a recruitment desk. Of course they don't. They might just value that support in terms of them building a business, which, as we were saying in this, building a desk, building a business, two different things.
Nice. And final question, I like to ask everyone this question: what does success look like for you moving forwards, and how has that changed over time?
Yeah, I think. I think it's changed. Yeah, absolutely has changed. I think for me, the business success has always been the same in terms of you want to work with the right types of agencies and be really selective in terms of who those individuals are, because of the way that we work with our guys, because you work with them for such a long period of time. You want to really get on with these guys and understand what they're looking to do. So being really selective with the types of recruiters that we work with has always been consistent. I think the other thing, I've got a little one, I've obviously got a grown little family. So it's building a vehicle that enables you to spend some time there as well, as opposed to solely being 100% on this kind of thing. But I think that's something that you have to do. The irony is if you spend 100% of your time on the business, you're probably less effective than if you actually take some time out and focus on other things that make you happy as well, because obviously it just betters that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to finish, mate. So, yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, well, thank you very much for your time, mate, and all the best with all. It looks fantastic. Obviously, what you guys are doing. So, thank you very much.